Cobalt Blue was a spin-out out of a company called Broken Hill Prospecting that's been active in Broken Hill for a decade, and the management have been involved with the project for 2 decades. It's spun out. It was launched in November, and we listed on the ASX in late January of this year.
When we talk mining in this part of the world, it's silver, lead and zinc, and gold with Porsche. Cobalt's something that probably not a lot of local people would know much about, Joe. Is it an easy metal to describe?
I think it is, but it's also highly distinct from industrial metals. So one needs to understand the demand, and demand really is all about lithium-ion batteries, and it's a subset of those. And it's all about the future in terms of economics. So energy storage, the ability to store energy when it's cheap and use it when it's otherwise expensive. That's the future. And the other part of that equation is the ability to store energy and then use it where you want it. So, for example, for a car, take it with you in the car. That's a big part of lithium-ion batteries going forward.
And Robert, as far as cobalt's concerned in Australia, is it a metal that's readily available, or is it more of an overseas product?
It's normally found, 98% of it is found as a byproduct of copper and nickel mining. We're in the other very, very small 2%, so we're what you'd call a pure play. We're not caught up in the whole beholden to copper and nickel. And we're lucky to have it here, one of the world's largest reserves here in Broken Hill.
So tell us a bit more about that, I suppose, Joe, the reserve that is outside of Broken Hill. Whereabouts is it, where it's located, and just really conducted enough drilling now to know what's in the ground?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Thackeringha area, and it's got a fascinating long-term history. The original mining dates back in the 1880s, where they were looking for silver, and then that actually predated the main line of lode in Broken Hill. Fast forward to the 60s and 70s, the geologists at fairly large companies thought that the line of lode could actually resurface somewhere on the outskirts. So they were looking for silver, lead, zinc mineralisation. They found pyrite, an iron mineral, and they found this pesky stuff called cobalt, which had very little commercial use. And again, fast forward to the 90s and early 2000s, the current owners saw the opportunities, thought that cobalt, because lithium-ion cells were coming into the market, decided to look at the property, acquire it in terms of the lease, and they've spent the money now to start drilling that through. We've taken over that drill program as Cobalt Blue, and we're in the thick of a very large program going forward.
What are you aware at this stage, what actually is in the ground, Robert?
We've got the benefit of approximately 10,000 metres of drilling just in the last 10 years. We're going to drill another 5,000 metres just in the next year and a half. And prior to that, as Joe said, you had companies like CRA there over the previous 30 years, and it's been investigated for close to 100 years.
Look, there's an extensive library of drill results there, so we're fairly confident there is an interesting deposit there. It's just really the ability to do the work systematically, and ultimately, if it does get into a more commercial reality, we'd like to know what's there before we press that button.
So a reasonably, and we discussed this off air, you've got a fairly strong drilling program set out for the next 3 years, and you're going to, I suppose, contribute a fair bit of money towards that?
Yeah, look, we're very excited. We've come to market with a kitty of around $10 million, and we're at this stage, we're doing it 1 year at a time, and working hand in hand with local stake owners, and effectively doing a drill program that'll let us know the size and, importantly, the quality of what's under the ground. And those two factors will then let us ultimately gauge the economics of what's there.
And we spoke about this bankable feasibility study as something that every mining company always puts on the table. Is that something you're now working towards? Yeah,
look, that's a necessary milestone. So we've put that out there to say, look, that's probably still another two and a bit years away for us. So it's a long-dated target for us. And again, everything we do now in terms of below ground work or even above ground work is all done in a structured fashion to achieve that as an outcome.
Is it a significant deposit, you think?
Look, potentially it will be. I'm a bit reticent to come in here and create large expectations, but it is unique. Rob mentioned that it's a primary cobalt play, which makes it one of a very small number in the world. In fact, I'm aware of only one other similar deposit in the world that gives that sort of an outcome. And we have every indication to believe that the size is very large. So we think we could be a large, potentially world-class deposit in the long term. But again, there's a lot of work between now and then.
You got to play a straight bat in this game, Robert, do you?
Totally, totally.
Situation's been for so many years that the line of lode here, which is a huge ore body, which everybody's well aware of, that's been here for way over 100 years, is something that's rather unique. And we've been made aware, I suppose, over the last 20 years that a lot smaller deposits, whether it's gold, such as the Porsche mine, or you're now talking cobalt or iron ore, which is just out on the Menindee Road. You think there's still enough those smaller deposits around this region to attract companies like yours?
Yeah, look, I think so. Ultimately, mining and economics go hand in hand. So a number of the smaller deposits, the higher grade deposits that we're aware of locally, they will come in and out of the market depending on the underlying economics. So look, you haven't seen the last of mining in Broken Hill in terms of new development. And in our case, in Cobalt's case, cobalt demand simply wasn't around to justify doing this sort of work we're doing even 15 years ago. So not only are you talking about historical metals, you mentioned silver, lead, zinc, but also these new metals coming through. I think there's really good prospects around Broken Hill. And
Robert, as a company, are you mainly focused on this region at this stage, or have you got other areas around Australia that you're also looking at?
No, our sole focus is on the Thackeringha mine. It's large enough to require all our attention and all our funds, the 10 million that we raised in our IPO. But look, the demand for cobalt is going through the roof with lithium-ion batteries in electric vehicles and mobile phones and other devices. Plus, as Joe will tell you, there's also a very large amount of cobalt required in Joe's aeronautical engineering, aviation frames and turbine engines. So, we've got to explore this region here because there's more than enough to make it one of the world's largest suppliers.
Would it be an operation? You're looking at a underground operation, or would it be an open cut operation?
Look, I think the results we're getting suggest it's fairly shallow. It's near surface, so that would tend to be an open cut style focus for us. It is quite near surface, but again, lots of work to be done between now and when we can definitively say how we'll mine it. But yeah, the positive indications are there.
So what would the process be once mined? You then got to get it to markets. Utilising Broken Hill as a major centre, but have you got the ability to have it in market, like rail it from where you will be, and how do you treat it?
Yeah, look, Broken Hill's blessed, aside from the mineral resource, is blessed with a number of logistical advancements which are wonderful for mining. So power is here. We're on the edge of the NEM, as you know. We can tap into mains power. We have water, and I know that's going through an upgrade cycle. People, some wonderful people, lots of them who have background in mining. The railway line is one you've touched on. It's a very good point. That's as you know, the original Broken Hill to Spencer Gulf line, and that, if you look at it from a point of view of Point Pirie at the end of that line, that's a deep water port which we can export the cobalt product to global markets because it's a global commodity. So we hope, if we get to that stage, to take advantage of that railway line. It should offer some considerable cost advantage. And your original question, how much are we going to do on site and not? At this stage, we're obviously going to mine it, crush it, grind it, float it. Similar technology to the original Broken Hill sulfides. Beyond that, again, we need to do a bit more work to understand.
The bankable feasibility study, once that's in place, it's all about then attracting some major investors into the project, Robert?
Correct. Once we get to that stage in 2 to 3 years' time, it's a matter of then marketing our great asset to the world.
Where are the markets for it around the world?
Yeah, it's a multi-step process. So you take a cobalt. You make what's called a cathode mass. So cathode is just an electrode on a battery, effectively. So there's a separate company that makes that, and then another company comes and packages it all up into a battery. So you figure like a C cell or a cell you see at home, that's not dissimilar to a cobalt lithium-ion battery. In fact, the AA cell you've got in your home is very similar in size to the standard lithium-ion offerings, the 186050. And once it's a battery, it then will go to another consumer, like an Apple, where typically they're custom-made batteries, but they'll go in the back of an iPhone. So you've really got sort of a 3-step handover process. Yep. And this goes to the point earlier about the other sources of supply, etc. It's that audit trail that these leading houses are trying to put into place.
But if you look at the flow, it's, as I said, 60 to 70% comes from one country, the DRC, and it's going to China. The cathode makers there roast it, and then it goes to the Japanese, who then on-sell it to predominantly the Americans.
So we'll get the crystal ball out again, Robert. I mean, if we sit here today, and there's a lot of work to be done over the next 2 to 3 years with the drilling program, the Bangor feasibility study. When do you think, and this all also relies on having an investor on board, and no doubt you're probably talking to various investors at the moment. If I asked you to put a bit of a date down the road where you'd like to put a shovel in the ground out there, you're talking, what, 3 to 4 years?
Oh, look, to be honest, it's a good question. It's a very pertinent question. I can understand why you're asking it, but I'm going to play a dead bat on that. We just don't know enough. And really, a lot of the community work we're doing in terms of introducing ourselves is in early days. So we need to work with the local community to get to that point to where we can answer that question. We also need to do our own study below and above ground to give you an answer to that question. So, that sort of time frame plus would be my short answer. But we'll come back to you.
And part of your visit to Broken Hill, Robert, I understand you're meeting with the mayor as well as a few other key stakeholders in town. Is it just to make yourself known? Although you have met a number of our council management team.
As I said, our company and our parent company have been in Broken Hill for up to 2 decades, and we already have a great relationship both with the landowners, the community, local government, state government, federal government. This morning we met with Kevin Humphreys, who we've met many times over the last few months, and he's very, very supportive and knows the area very well. In fact, he's just coming up to his 10-year anniversary next week as the state national state member for Barwon. But no, just to let the local community know we're here and that there's a great asset just on their doorstep.